Hi folks, it's your little buddy, the Suburban Hippie Experimentalist, and I'm with my neighbor Chris.
How's it going, guys?
What year truck is this?
1979.
And what is it?
C10 step side, short bed.
And he pulled it out of the weeds, and you want to tell us the process?
Yeah, it was probably about an hour away. I found it on Craigslist, sitting in someone's backyard. It was his dad's. Dad passed away. He said he didn't want it anymore, so I dragged it home. Brakes were locked up in the back, flat tires all around. Engine didn't run. Anything was, it was in bad shape. A few spots of rust, nothing too special. I'm trying to think of any of the huge. There was a few.
Well, the brakes didn't work.
No, they were locked up. The back brakes were locked up, and the front brakes, the wires were completely rusted out.
So what did you have to do to get the brakes working?
Oh, and the other thing was the transmission.
Oh.
So brakes, I actually increased with the brake booster. It had just this on the mount, so I got the brake booster, ran all new wires down.
And why'd you have to run the new lines?
They were rusted out.
So what happened? So it wouldn't apply pressure? It wouldn't?
Yeah, it wouldn't. It would just start leaking all over because there was rust all through these lines.
Can you tell us a little bit about that process, what you had to do?
So I actually went to the auto parts store, I think AutoZone. Took them the actual length of what I had. I pulled it right out of here, took it in, and I said, this is what I want. They gave me the full length. It was a completely straight line, so I actually had to bend all the angles. And I got a little crimper, and I started bending all the wires. Came up to the actual coils. They're not perfect by any means, but for just doing it by a little crimper.
Did you coil these yourself?
I bent them all myself.
Oh, they look awesome.
Yeah, I actually did that by hand and with a little crimper. Yeah.
So when you replace these lines, did it work?
Not at first. The front started, it wouldn't bleed in the front. The back started to bleed properly. I had to do brakes in the back, the new drums. I had completely all around in the back. Found out that they were bleeding properly. I came up to the front and they weren't bleeding at all. I came to this point here where it's a splicer, that's what I'm calling it. It's a little silver splicer, and this one goes to the rear, and then these ones go up to the front. This is the driver's side, this is the passenger side, and the passenger side comes down and out. So this was completely clogged, so I had to remove this. I ordered one off of Amazon. It wasn't too expensive. Once I got that in, still wouldn't bleed the front, so ran all new line to the actual fronts and found that the outside, they are rubber hosed brake lines to the calipers were completely clogged up. So I had to get new rubber hose lines, run those into the calipers. The calipers, the screws on top where you bleed, were completely rusted off. So I had to replace the calipers, replace the drums, or I'm sorry, not the drums, the disc brakes themselves. It was a serious process.
So you pretty much replaced the brakes on the total front of the car.
Oh yeah, the whole front, back, the whole back. The only thing I didn't replace was the brake line from the front all the way to the back. That was still salvageable, so I left that in place.
So what'd you have to do? I know you replaced the transmission, right?
Oh yes. So
and then the tail of the transmission didn't fit, right?
Yeah. So it's a 350 small block in front, and then I had a 400 turbo transmission, and it was out of I think it was a Oldsmobile van or something that the guy had in there. It wasn't turning over. It was dumping tons of transmission fluid everywhere. So I pulled that out and did some research, and in this truck was a 350 small block or 350 turbo transmission with a kick down cable. So I thought, I'm going to try to keep the 400 turbo because that's, a better transmission. Took it to a buddy, and there was water in the bottom of it, rusted out the bottom gears, everything. It was destroyed. And so hopped on Craigslist, found myself a 350 turbo with the kickdown cable. Bought that came out of a running driving vehicle. Stuck it right in here, hoping that it would just go. And it's running great. The transmission is out of a 77, so it's actually 2 years older than this truck. It was a rebuilt transmission with a what is it called? The
shift kit?
Shift kit was placed in. So it's running smooth as of right now, knock on wood.
Didn't you have to cut the drive shaft?
Yes.
Didn't you tell me you had to get a custom drive shaft made for it?
So the drive shaft that came out of it for the 400, I don't know where it came from, but it was the 400 turbo transmission was, I'd say 5 inches longer than the 350. So I had to get a new drive shaft. I went to the junkyard, found 92 1500 GMC, and I took that drive shaft out of it, brought it here, and I was about, I'd say 3 inches too short. So I got a new, the piece that goes in between the drive shaft and the actual transmission.
I think I used to call them yokes.
Thank you. Yoke off of eBay, and I think it's I would say it's a Camaro yoke. It was a 6-inch yoke, and it was 2 inches too long. So I took my zip wheel, cut off the 2 inches, and now it bolted in proper, and it's completely the right length and runs great.
So then we tried to tune the carburetor, and we kind of got it a couple times, and then ultimately what happened with that?
Carburetor was not able to be tuned very well. We kept using the screws on the outside to tune it. Wouldn't work. So I finally just decided to take off the gas line, take all the hoses off, remove the carburetor, and rebuild the carburetor. The kit was $50 off of, actually I got it at the AutoZone down the street.
Now this is your first Holly, right? But you've rebuilt other carburetors. And how difficult did you find that to rebuild?
Thank goodness YouTube is a wonderful tool. I was able to show, or they were able to show me the ways to remove each piece and which gaskets to place in there. Spray the gaskets down with silicone. The whole shebang. I was able to put it all back together within about, I'd say, 2 days. It was a weekend job.
Cool.
Yeah, I tore it down, left it in kerosene fluid to eat away a little bit of the nasty gunk. There was a lot of sediment, a lot of garbage at the bottom, so pulled it out of the kerosene fluid, and then I took my carburetor spray cleaner and just went through every port like they said on YouTube, placed it all up, buttoned it up, and it's running.
So then we had to set the floats. We had to adjust those.
Here and here.
Then there's sight screws on each side, so you pull the sight screws out and you make sure that, the way we did it back in the day is you make sure that the fuel just barely runs out of there, and you adjust it by raising and lowering the needle valves. So we did that. We've adjusted it. What did we do today? What happened today with your truck?
So today there was actually a really interesting problem. I actually did the gas line. I had to do a new fuel.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. That let you sit on the side of the road one day, didn't it?
Yeah, it left me, I went to Walmart and it died, and I had to keep hitting with a hammer, and it was tick, 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 and then it stopped, and then it started up again. So I walked over to the auto store, bought a new one, came back, stuck it in here, drove it home, and then bolted it to the frame, so it was flopping around.
Actually, I didn't know that story. I didn't know you actually went to the auto store. It was sitting on the side of the road.
Yep.
You replaced it. That's kind of like RoadRash, actually.
Yeah, it was
That's cool, though. It's a good story.
It was only a couple miles away.
Okay, so that's that. And then today it was overheating, right?
It was overheating. I had a fan in here when I bought it. It was wired up to the front with a switch. I guess the person before me wanted to have a way to turn it off and turn it on. And then also it was ran to the battery. So I had two different ways of having power, and it wasn't right. So what we did was we cut the switch out, cut everything out, and just ran it straight to the battery. And now all we have is a temperature gauge here, hooked to the radiator, and it runs straight over to the thermostat. Thank you. And then it turns on the fan at roughly about 175 to 180 for temperature. But it was overheating. It was blowing radiator fluid all over the ground. It got too hot. And
we also think that the thermostat here in the water neck, it freezes up.
Mm-hmm. The spring
so
is
he has to replace
up.
that. It actually, now that we've got the fan running, it actually runs too cold. So it's really impossible to drive and set. So he needs to replace that thermostat.
Yep.
Let me show them some more things that you've done. Oh, also, look at his beautiful battery mount. When he got this, when I first met this truck, it was like bungee corded up to the fender. So now he's got it all mounted down.
Went to the junkyard, got a battery mount for a 82, and I went to put it in this 79. It did not fit. It actually was bottoming out on the wheel well. So I cut the base off, put a metal sheet in here onto the old battery mount, and it's actually bolted in really well. Then I bolted the battery mount to the piece of metal, and now the battery's
solid enough, I guess.
Solid and locked in.
Let me show them the rest of the things that I can remember. So the tires were dry rotted on the front. His buddy had those, so he replaced these, and he painted the rims there. And he's still got, these tires seem decent on the back. He wants to paint these rims black. He's got wood that he's cut for the bed. He's going to put that in there and make this look really nice. He's also, thank you.
Yeah, haven't bolted it down yet, just cut it to the right length.
He's also replaced the bumper here. This had a black tube.
It's a tube bumper.
He's gotten the turn signals working. We replaced the bulbs. It had a really junky steering column in there that would rattle around. He's actually replaced this the other day. So this is nice and solid. The horn didn't work. The previous owner had that fan that we discussed. He had it connected to the circuit for the horn. He had pulled the fuse out for the horn, so it didn't work. And now the horn works. He's fixed the doors didn't close, right?
Yeah, the doors and windows did not go down.
Right, he's fixed these.
It took me a couple of hours of WD-40, cranking and cranking and cranking and cranking and cranking, and just kept running WD-40 through it.
So Chris has been getting a little discouraged on this truck, you know, when he finds out it has all these things, but he's actually done a lot to it. And it's actually pretty amazing that he pulled this thing out of the weeds. And I'm actually surprised he got that engine running after sitting for 10 years. And it hasn't blown up. It seems to run good. It's got a sticky lifter, I think, or we think. Yep. But it actually runs pretty good. And I'm excited to see once he changes the spark plugs that have been in there for probably 20 years. And we get the thermostat fixed and the fan worked out. I'm interested to see how this runs. I think it's going to run pretty nice. As you can hear, it's got a pretty nasty cam in it. But it's a pretty impressive job as far as I'm concerned.
It's coming together.
And also he needs to bolt down this master cylinder. These two bolts at the top don't really fit. But it's drivable and it's a cool little project. Thanks for watching.